Norbert Denef needed half a lifetime to finally talk about his trauma. As a 10-year-old altar boy, he was sexually abused by a Catholic priest. The memories remain with him to this day.
After Mass, he took me to his apartment, locked the door, sat down, and sat me on his lap. Then he opened my pants and took out my penis. It was like I knew it wasn't right. I always knew that. But I let it happen. Notice nothing, feel nothing, let it happen. The body frozen. And anyone could do what they wanted with me.
The abuse continued for years. The priest was a friend of the family, a guest even at Christmas time. After he was transferred, another church employee abused Norbert, who was by then 16. He was 53 when he finally came forward. The men in question admitted their deeds to their superiors. The church paid Denef compensation in return for his silence. Denef wants to bring the surviving perpetrator to justice. But according to the Statute of Limitations, this crime can no longer be prosecuted.
This has to be abolished. Sexual violence murders the soul, and there's no statute of limitations on murder.
Existing laws give abuse victims 10 and, in grievous cases, a maximum of 20 years to report the crime, since it's important that they remember the details clearly. But therapists say that's too short a period for many victims. Since the abuse experience is loaded with shame and anxiety, the memories often remain clear and detailed, even decades later.
They have a certain significance and therefore they're permanent. But I can't access them. And that makes it so hard to express these memories on time, as it were. I need a certain distance first, a foundation for my memories. And by that time, depending on the circumstances, those 10 years may have elapsed.
Still, legal experts warn against changing the limitation statutes. Even decades later, the events surrounding a case of sexual abuse must be proven beyond a doubt. Even with witnesses, the Catholic Church cases can barely be credibly pieced together anymore, and that's why the law sets limits.
The need for legal certainty requires it. After a certain time, I can't provide proof anymore, and it becomes a game of accusation and denial. No objective authority can determine anymore what's true or false.
Instead, Germany's justice minister wants the church to cooperate more with state authorities on abuse allegations. That prompted an angry response from church leaders. The latest meeting of German bishops in Freiburg was overshadowed by the abuse scandal. After a long silence, the bishops formally apologized but made no mention of sanctions against those responsible. They say the guidelines set a few years ago on dealing with problem clergy are effective.
We will discuss the guidelines, and I will suggest we establish a small working group that will closely examine the guidelines and how they're used.
But critics within the church say these internal rules aren't enough. They say the Statute of Limitations plays into the church's hands, and that current procedures serve to protect the church's image instead of helping victims achieve justice.
Only public pressure can force the church to change its ways, because unfortunately they're still trying to resolve matters internally. But now we see that's not enough.
The Catholic Church will now have to explain whether it's been too concerned with keeping out secular justice. Its attitude has led many victims to demand the abolition of the Statute of Limitations for sex crimes. But Norbert Denef knows that won't make it easier to prove abuse.
But it will change one thing, the recognition of the harm done to victims. So will the people think about it. Victims won't be ashamed anymore.
We cannot permanently keep reprocessing the past. We live in the present and in the future. There's still a backward-looking, repressive criminal law for a certain time, but once the time limit is passed, that's over too. The victim must return to the present and come to terms with the future. The perpetrator too.
Sexual abuse leaves deep and lasting emotional scars. The justice system can't change that. But what the church can do is help prevent more people from becoming victims.